They always thought we were harmless. That was their first mistake. For 86 years, Earth had been part of the Galactic Council. We followed their rules, sat quietly in the back rows, clapped when told, and handed over our tech like good little savages. They laughed at our history, snickered at our brutal past, and told us we'd finally civilized ourselves by joining them. What they didn't know was we were holding back. I remember the day everything changed. I was stationed on Echelon Prime, the so-called heart of Council diplomacy. Clean towers, silver skies, arrogant species with soft hands and colder hearts. I wasn't a soldier anymore. They called me Human Liaison Officer, which really meant pet earthling who smiles when the real powers walk in. But when the Council voted to sanction Earth for non-compliance, I knew it was coming. They said we had refused to share all our military data, that we had violated trust. Trust? What trust? We gave them fusion reactors, medical breakthroughs, climate stabilizers. They gave us orders. And when we asked to keep just one defensive protocol classified, they acted like we'd committed war crimes. The sanctions weren't the worst part. What really hit hard was when they handed our orbital defense satellites to the Drankari. That cold-blooded lizard race hated us. Always had. Always will. They called us monkeys with delusions of dominance. The Council thought putting them in charge of Earth's skies would send a message. Yeah, it did. It told every Earth-born human that we were never equal in their eyes, that our place was to serve, not to stand. The first strike happened 11 days later. Not on a battlefield, not in space, right in a refugee station above Saturn's moon Titan. A Council ship, flown by a Drankari commander, accidentally launched a kinetic rod through the habitat's shield. 2,000 civilians, gone, mostly children and medics. They called it a tragic malfunction. I saw the footage. There was no malfunction. The next morning, Earth recalled every single diplomat from Council space. Quietly. No threats, no angry speeches. Just gone. 3 days after that, our communication relays went dark. Not jammed, not destroyed. Just switched off. Like someone pulled the plug. Then came silence. You see, what they never understood, what no one in that gilded council chamber ever bothered to ask, was why Earth had gone so quiet for so long. They thought we were scared. We were building. Preparing. Not because we wanted war, but because we knew it would come. By the time the Council noticed the silence, it was too late. They sent a recon fleet to check in on Earth. 5 capital ships, 12 cruisers, and over 50 fighters, all loaded with high-spec sensors and automated translators, probably expecting to catch us violating something. None of them returned. Council Command chalked it up to a natural anomaly. A black hole surge, gravitational interference. I heard all the excuses. They couldn't accept the truth. That Earth had finally stopped playing nice. The day the truth hit, I was sitting in a council chamber filled with diplomats who still didn't take humans seriously. I watched their faces change when the emergency alert came in. An entire outpost on the fringe of the Virexian belt, wiped off the map. No trace of attackers, no communications, just ashes and a single message left behind in flawless galactic standard. You drew first blood. Earth answers last. The room went cold. One of the elders, some crusty 12-limbed politician from the Jultari cluster, finally said what none of them wanted to hear. Earth has gone rogue. I didn't say a word, just watched. Because the truth was, we hadn't gone rogue. We were just being ourselves, for the first time in a century. They kept calling it a miscommunication. Even after 3 more listening posts went dark, no warning, no transmission, just obliterated in a blink, The Council still refused to believe it was us. The Virexian outpost had been just the beginning. We didn't fire nukes. We didn't send fleets. That would have made it too obvious. We did something worse. We vanished. Earth went dark. No traffic in or out, no trade ships, no diplomats, not even pirate signals. It was like the planet folded in on itself and disappeared from the galactic stage. Every known Earth outpost deactivated its transponders. Every AI communication channel went offline. Even our shared research projects suddenly lost access to every Earth database. And still, the Council refused to panic, because deep down, they wanted to believe we were still the harmless pets they thought we were. The ones they could leash with sanctions, intimidate with starfleets, silence with shame. They didn't realize we'd just been waiting for them to cross a line. I was one of the few humans left in Council space. Technically a civilian observer, though by then, even that was a lie. I had orders, quiet ones, and I wasn't the only one. Scattered across Council space, there were dozens of us lying in wait, not to attack, to watch, and when the time came, to witness, because Earth wasn't just retaliating, it was making a point. The next strike hit the Hadrex Array, a massive research facility orbiting the twin suns of Krelix. It was protected by 3 fleets, 30 automated defense grids, and 8 planetary sentries. State-of-the-art, funded by half the Council. They used it to map dark matter anomalies across the quadrant. They found their own destruction instead. I still remember the message sent out afterward. Short, brutal, human. We gave you peace. You gave us graves. The Council called an emergency meeting. Not just the usual dozen power species, but all 300 member races. They tried to spin it like Earth had become unstable, dangerous. Some even said we were being manipulated, maybe by the Zalek Hive, or some rogue AI faction. They couldn't accept that humanity, the galaxy's silent partner, was now leading its own war. They needed a scapegoat, and they tried to find one in me. 2 Council guards escorted me from my quarters before sunrise. No warning, no charges, just cold eyes, and the kind of grip that said resistance wouldn't end well. They dragged me to the high chamber, some ceremonial courtroom where they dealt with high-profile threats. I'd been there once before, years ago, during a trade dispute. It had seemed majestic then. Now it just felt hollow. Dozens of species filled the observation decks. No cheers, no outrage, just curiosity and fear. The central figure, Archon Telmar, an amphibious, bloated creature with silver gills and a voice like gurgling oil, spoke first. Human Alexander, you stand here representing your species. What do you say to these acts of destruction attributed to your kind? I stood silent for a moment, scanning their faces. Some looked away. Some met my eyes, searching for some explanation that would comfort them. That would make this not their fault. I gave them none. What did you expect? I asked. My voice echoed louder than I thought. You handed our orbit to an enemy race, you killed our children, and then you called us aggressive. Telmar's face hardened. Your world was offered every opportunity to comply with the Council. You rejected unity. No, I snapped. We respected unity. We gave more than anyone. We gave tech you couldn't even understand. We offered medicine that cured your plagues. We held back because we believed in peace. But every time we gave, you took more. And when we said no, once, you responded with death. A silence followed, thick and charged. Another elder, a slim fox-faced diplomat from the Visari, spoke next. Surely you don't expect us to believe Earth would willingly isolate itself and commit acts of war. You still don't get it, I said quietly. You still think we need you. That's when the lights cut. Not just in the chamber. across the entire council spire. Power outages in council space were unheard of. Their infrastructure was shielded against every imaginable cause: EMPs, solar flares, quantum disruptors. This wasn't a system failure. This was a message. Red emergency lights flickered on. Sirens screamed through the spire. I could see guards scrambling at the exits, comms flaring to life. Everyone looked confused, except me, because I already knew what it meant. Earth had just tapped into their systems and turned them off. A moment later, a council comms officer burst into the chamber. "We've lost external comms. The planetary net is down. Orbital defenses are unresponsive." Panic. Pure, delicious panic. They called for evacuation protocols, but none of the gates responded. The spire had been locked from the outside. Earth had disabled the galactic capital's control center like flipping a switch, and all without firing a shot. Telmar looked at me with something I hadn't seen in him before. Genuine fear. "What is your government's demand?" he asked, voice low. I shook my head. "You still don't understand. This isn't a negotiation. This is the reveal. For 100 years you thought Earth had gone soft, civilized. You thought we'd traded our fire for comfort." I stepped forward, and the guards didn't stop me. They were too busy checking their useless weapons. "The truth is, we saw you for what you were. Decadent, arrogant, and weak. And we knew that sooner or later you'd turn on us, so we prepared. Silently. Relentlessly. And now?" I smiled. "Now you get to see what we really are." The screen behind me flickered to life. Another failure, they thought, until they saw what was being broadcast. Earth. Not a live feed, a recording. Dozens of them. Military factories. Orbital weapons that hadn't existed on any council blueprint. AI-driven war machines that made their drones look like toys. And the worst of all, the ARC protocol. They had no idea what it was. But it scared them. I watched as species after species realized the Council's power had never been real. It was borrowed, stolen, and Earth had stopped lending. That day, Earth didn't invade. Didn't occupy, didn't ask, it just pulled the curtain back and showed the galaxy how small it really was. The message ended, and the chamber fell into stunned silence. No one spoke. What could they say? Then the second message began. This one wasn't pre-recorded. It was live. A man's face appeared on screen. Older, maybe late 50s, stern, gray streaks in his hair, no medals, no fancy titles, just a plain black shirt with an Earth insignia behind him. He spoke softly, coldly. "To the Galactic Council. This is not a war declaration. This is a correction. For decades, Earth has contributed knowledge, resources, and peace. You responded with arrogance, theft, and violence. You took our goodwill for weakness. You mistook mercy for cowardice. Let me be clear. We do not want conquest. We do not seek destruction. But we will never be beneath you again. Earth is no longer part of your council. And from this point forward, you will never see us coming." The screen went dark. And in that moment, every single species in that chamber knew the truth. Earth had never been tame. They'd just been too blind to see the leash was never around our neck. The council didn't fall in a day. They staggered first, like a boxer who just took a punch he never saw coming. The declaration from Earth left them shaken, but still clinging to the illusion of control. Meetings were called hourly. Emergency subcommittees formed and dissolved within hours. They debated sanctions, countermeasures, defensive posturing. None of it mattered. Because for the first time in recorded galactic history, Earth had gone silent, and no one could do a damn thing about it. I spent the next 3 days locked in a high-security observation chamber. They called it protective custody. but it felt more like a panic room. I wasn't interrogated. I wasn't charged. They just didn't know what to do with me. I was the closest thing to a liaison Earth had left, and even that was a lie now. One of the guards, a six-eyed brute from the Karathi colonies, finally broke protocol and asked me, "Why didn't we see it? Why didn't anyone see what your kind was capable of?" I stared at him for a long time before answering. "You saw it," I said. "You just didn't want to believe it." Because the signs had always been there. Earth was the only species that had survived 2 self-inflicted nuclear holocausts and still clawed its way back. We were the only civilization that had weaponized extinction multiple times, then buried it like it never happened. We had collapsed our economy, destroyed ecosystems, rewired our DNA, and still reached for the stars. The Council thought that made us unpredictable. What they didn't realize was that it made us inevitable. The fracture began on day 4. The Drankari were the first to break ranks. They'd always been Earth's loudest critics, sneering at our primal instincts and uncivilized history. They were also the ones who bombed the Titan station. And now? Now they were scared. Their colony on Arak 7 went dark overnight. No explosion, no trace of battle, just gone. 17 million of their kind erased from existence. The Council assumed it was a glitch in the planetary net. Then came the drone footage. A lone human vessel hovering in low orbit. No weapons discharged. No announcements made. Then it vanished. The Drankari ambassador stormed into the main council chamber that morning, demanding full military retaliation. "Earth has crossed every line," he bellowed. "They must be destroyed before they destroy us all." But the others? They weren't so sure anymore. The Visari, the Korn, the Lukari Syndicate, all of them had profited from Earth. They'd grown fat on human tech, expanded their fleets with Earth-designed AI, and healed their diseases with Earth-born medicine. They didn't want a war, especially not one they weren't sure they could win. "Earth is only one planet," someone said, trying to sound confident. "They cannot stand against all of us." That's when the real footage leaked. The Ark Protocol. Not some doomsday weapon. Something worse. The Ark Protocol was Earth's exit strategy, not from the Council, but from the galaxy itself. Hidden colonies, independent fleets, thousands of cloaked ships carrying hundreds of thousands of civilians, soldiers, scientists, entire biomes, launched quietly over decades into deep space. They weren't preparing to fight the galaxy. They were preparing to outlive it. Because Earth had always known this day would come, maybe not exactly like this, but close enough, that eventually someone would test our limits, push too far, break something we couldn't forgive. And when that happened, we wouldn't ask for help. We'd leave the fire burning behind us and just walk away. After the Ark footage spread, everything changed. The smaller species panicked. Trade collapsed. 2 member worlds shut their borders entirely, afraid Earth might already be there. The banking clans froze interstellar credit transfers, afraid of human interference. Half of the outposts near Sol pulled their fleets back, not to fight, but to run. It was a silent confession, really. They knew Earth had been holding back, and now they didn't know what else we were hiding. That's when the Council turned on each other. The Visari accused the Korn of harboring human sympathizers. The Jultari called for preemptive strikes on all Sol-adjacent systems. The Drankari began raiding fringe colonies in self-defense, triggering border skirmishes that hadn't happened in a century. Peace had always been fragile. Earth was just the hammer that broke the glass. I watched it unfold from inside a cold, sterile cell. No windows, just news feeds and council alerts. I didn't speak for days. What could I say? Humanity hadn't started the war. We'd simply stopped pretending we wouldn't finish it. On day 7, someone finally came for me. Not a guard this time, not a council diplomat. A woman, though not human. She looked human enough, except her skin shimmered faintly with embedded data circuits, and her eyes flickered like live feeds. Corin hybrid, half organic, half machine. She didn't introduce herself, just unlocked the door and said, "You're leaving. Now." "Council order?" "Earth's," she said. "They're extracting all remaining assets. You're on the list." I didn't ask how they found me. I didn't ask how they were inside council systems again, because I already knew. She took me through underground access tunnels I never even knew existed. It was chaos above, fights, riots, rumors of an assassination. The spire was collapsing under its own paranoia. We emerged in a hangar bay I'd never seen before. Dark, unregistered, completely off-grid. And sitting inside it was something that didn't belong there. A human stealth frigate, black as oil, silent as death. "Are we the last ones?" I asked her as we approached. She didn't look at me. "Number just the last ones you'll see." As I stepped onto the ship, I paused, turned around. "You think this ends in war?" I asked. She tilted her head, almost like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. Then she smiled. A bitter, broken thing. "It already did," she said. "You just didn't notice because Earth didn't fire the first shot." The ramp sealed behind me. We left orbit in silence. Hours later, the council spire exploded. No warning, no survivors. A containment breach triggered by unknown factors, they said. But the truth? There was no sabotage. They destroyed it themselves. Because after Earth's message, after the system's blackout, after the data leak of the ARC protocol, the Council knew they weren't safe anymore. Not from us, not from each other. The very institution they built, the structure that gave them power, had become a target. And like cowards, they did what all dying empires do. They burned the evidence and ran. Back aboard the frigate, I sat alone in a cold metal room, staring at a single screen, waiting. I didn't know who would contact me. Maybe no one. Maybe this was just the end. But then the screen blinked, and a voice filled the room. Not a face, just a voice. Male. Calm. American accent, I think. Familiar but distant. "You did your job," the voice said. "They saw what we wanted them to see." I nodded. "You think they'll come after us?" A pause. "They'll think about it. Then they'll remember what happened to the Drankari colonies. And they'll think again." I looked down. My hands were still shaking. "So what now?" Another pause, then the voice answered. "Now we vanish. Let them fight each other. Let the galaxy burn if it wants to. Earth gave them a century of peace. They wasted it." "And us?" I asked. "We just disappear?" The voice didn't hesitate. "We build something better." Then the screen went dark. And for the first time in my life, I felt what they must have felt when they first saw us rise from the ashes of our own extinction. Fear, not of war, not of death, but of what happens when humanity finally decides it's done playing nice. The stars looked different now. Not brighter, not darker, just emptier. From the deck of the stealth frigate, I stared into the silence of deep space, trying to grasp the scale of what had just happened. The Galactic Council, an empire that had ruled half the known galaxy for centuries, was crumbling. Not because we'd bombed their capitals or unleashed superweapons. We'd done something worse. We made them irrelevant. Humanity had stepped off the stage, and the whole galaxy had no idea what to do without us. I hadn't spoken to another human in over a week. The ship was I run, No crew. Efficient, silent, clinical. Just me and the hum of systems that responded to thoughts more than words. It was lonely. But then again, loneliness was something we'd mastered long before space travel. Earth had been on its own since the beginning. We were used to isolation. We grew in it. The AI finally pinged me on day 10. Approaching Arc Nexus 3. Prepare for transition. I leaned forward. Confirm origin. Is it ours? Nexus 3 was established under Black Protocol Alpha. Earth origin, human-only command structure. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. So it was real. They'd told me about the arcs during my training, but even then, it had sounded like rumor. Ghost ships launched in secret, deep space colonies buried inside planetary shells, fleets that never showed up on any chart. Earth had scattered its survival like seeds in the wind, waiting, watching, ready to grow if things went wrong. And now? Now those seeds were waking up. The ship eased through a cloud of static, past a decoy moon that shielded a gravitational anomaly. Then, without warning, space ripped, not violently, quietly, like a curtain pulled back. Behind it was a station the size of a small planet. Black metal. No lights, no signals. Until we got close. Then it lit up like a heartbeat. Nexus 3. Home. The inside of the Ark felt less like a station and more like a bunker built by madmen and visionaries. Every corridor was layered in kinetic shielding. Every room could convert into a combat-ready lockdown within seconds. Weapons were everywhere, integrated into walls, hidden in floors, even embedded in ceilings. Civilian tech merged with war design like someone had built paradise and rigged it to explode just in case. And yet, it was beautiful, quiet, clean, controlled, efficient like Earth used to be before we started playing diplomat. I was greeted by a man who looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. Gaunt, mid-40s, military haircut, arms like steel cables. No name badge, no rank. Just nodded at me and said, "You're late." "Ship took the long way," I said. He cracked a smile that never touched his eyes. "Everything takes the long way now. Come on." He led me to a debriefing chamber. Plain, circular, no windows. Inside, there were 6 others, all human, all sharp-eyed, silent, hardened. No one introduced themselves, no handshakes, just mutual recognition. We were survivors. We were weapons, waking up in a galaxy that no longer had any rules. The man, who still never gave his name, stood at the center and activated a 3D holo projection. Dozens of red marks blinked across the galaxy. "Council is done," he said. "Factions are tearing each other apart. The Drankari lost 3 colonies to civil unrest. The Visari executed half their senate after a failed alliance attempt. Trade networks are collapsing, and everyone's looking over their shoulder for us." He smiled. "And they should be." One of the others, older, maybe ex-Special Forces by the look of him, leaned forward. "You think they'll come at us together? Make a play?" The man shook his head. "They can't. They're too afraid of each other now. Earth was the glue. They took us for granted. Now they're panicking." "What's our move?" I asked. He paused, looked around the room, then said what none of us expected. "We don't move." The silence that followed wasn't confusion. It was tension. Controlled. Waiting. He stepped closer to the holomap and tapped a green icon, a blinking dot deep in unexplored space. "That's Arc Nexus 5. It activated last week. We now have 6 full Arc networks operational, self-sustaining, cloaked, armed, each capable of launching an extinction-level defense." Someone whistled. "So what, we just sit in the dark while the galaxy eats itself?" He looked at them, then at all of us. "We're not hiding. We're letting the galaxy remember what happens when Earth leaves the room. And when they finally crawl back, because they will crawl, we decide the terms. That was the strategy. Let the galaxy rot. Let them feel the absence of humanity. Let them destroy themselves. Then return, not as equals, but as architects. Over the next month, I worked as part of the Nexus Recon team. Our job was observation, nothing more. No engagement, no contact, just listen. And what we heard confirmed everything. The Council remnants were falling apart. The Drankari were killing each other over control of surviving territories. One of their moons declared independence and was immediately glassed by orbiting loyalists. The Visari tried to form a peace coalition, but were betrayed by two of their own species, leading to a planetary coup. Even worse, they still blamed Earth for all of it. Good. Let them. Because the more they blamed us, the more they revealed how much they depended on us. One of our recon drones intercepted a transmission from the Lucari. They'd tried to replicate Earth's AI systems to stabilize their banking clusters. It backfired. The AI triggered a logic collapse in their data centers, wiping out trillions in currency. They begged for Earth's help. No response. And the more silent we stayed, the more desperate they became. By the third month, 3 major species had started openly broadcasting messages into deep space. Earth, we are ready to talk. Humanity, the Council is no more. We seek alliance. We admit our mistakes. We beg your return. It would have been funny if it weren't so pathetic. They never learned. They still thought Earth was just another player. What they didn't understand was that Earth was never playing their game. We'd just been watching. And now? We were building our own. One night I was summoned again by the nameless commander. This time he looked different. Older, somehow. Worn out. He handed me a data slate. "New mission," he said. "You're going back." I stared at him. "Back where?" "Council space." I blinked. "You just said..." "Not as a diplomat. As a reminder." He tapped the slate. A list of coordinates. Names. Locations of key surviving council figures. Leaders, scientists, military chiefs. Some of them are trying to rebuild the council. Quietly. Behind closed doors. Same hierarchy, same arrogance. We're not going to stop them. "Why not?" He smiled again. Cold. Quiet. "Because we want them to rebuild. Then we take it." That was Earth's final play. Let the galaxy patch itself back together, just enough to stand, then seize it, not with guns, but with presence, with control, quietly, strategically. We'd become the shadow behind every trade agreement, the architect behind every treaty, the ghost in every planetary system. We weren't here to be part of the galaxy anymore. We were here to own it. So I took the mission. Back into council space. Back into the ruins of an empire that once laughed at Earth. I walked among them like a ghost. No badge, no announcement, just eyes and ears. And everywhere I went, I saw the same thing. Fear. They whispered Earth's name like it was a god, or a curse. Some blamed us for everything. Some begged for our return. But none of them dared raise a weapon. Because they all knew now. Humanity was never civilized. We were just polite. And we'd stopped being polite the moment they thought they could control us. The first lesson we taught them was fear. The second lesson was silence. The third? Control. I moved like a shadow through the broken corridors of the Council's ruins, rebranded now as the Unified Star Alliance, some desperate attempt to reforge what Earth had shattered. A few species still held on to their titles. Former senators, admirals, delegates. But they all had the same look in their eyes now. They didn't talk to each other without looking over their shoulders. They didn't make decisions without checking first who was listening. And I made sure they knew. Someone always was. My new identity was clean, fabricated, flawless. The ARC command had burned my real name the second I stepped onto Nexus 3. The person I used to be didn't exist anymore. I was now an independent tech consultant from a minor border system, fluent in 16 dialects, licensed in logistics, strategy, AI infrastructure. The kind of person no one noticed, until the wrong system failed at the worst time. Then they listened, and I made sure what they heard was always just enough to keep them dependent. I embedded myself in the Lucari Regrowth Project first, a fumbling effort to stabilize interstellar trade routes after the collapse of the central banking grid. They were desperate, starving, clinging to the last fragments of Earth's AI systems, most of which they barely understood. They didn't know I'd helped design those systems 10 years ago. Didn't know Earth had built them with tripwires and hidden back doors. Didn't know I could crash their entire currency in 10 seconds with a neural flick. Instead, they begged for guidance. "We can't get the adaptive chain to sync across the quadrant," their lead systems officer told me one evening, hands trembling over a glowing console. "Every time we stabilize one sector, another collapses. It's like the damn thing's infected." I smiled. "It's not infected. It's starving." "Starving?" I leaned closer. "It's missing context. These systems were designed to operate alongside human cognitive architecture. Without human oversight, they become unstable. But we can't get Earth back." "You don't need Earth," I lied. "You need people like me." He looked at me like I was salvation itself. And just like that, the noose tightened. Within 2 weeks, I had access to 63% of the Regrowth Project's infrastructure. Every credit transaction, every resource trade, every shipment manifest. I rewrote protocols in the background. Small changes, nothing flashy, the kind you wouldn't notice until it was too late. Every time they fixed a glitch, it created a new one elsewhere. Every time they tried to optimize, the system just needed a little more of my help. And every time they called me back, they handed over a little more control. I wasn't the only one. Across the former council territories, Earth's operatives moved like smoke. Engineers, advisors, consultants, never soldiers, never with guns. That would have been too obvious. No, we came offering solutions. Peace, stability, guidance. And they lapped it up like starving dogs. Because while they spent the last century treating us like wild primitives with a knack for war, we had studied them, understood their psychology, mapped their weaknesses, their pride, their paranoia. We didn't need fleets to conquer them. We just needed access. I got my first glimpse of the new council chamber during a summit on Veltrix Prime. They called it the Coalition of Shared Prosperity, as if renaming the mess would erase the stench of failure. The chamber was smaller now, less formal, fewer species. Most of the old powers had collapsed or withdrawn completely. I wasn't allowed inside, of course, not officially, but I didn't need to be. The chamber's environmental control systems were patched into a logistics network I'd helped stabilize. That meant I could hear everything, every conversation, every bribe, every fear-soaked negotiation. And that's when I heard the phrase for the first time. "We should ask Earth." It came from a Vezari minister, her voice hushed but heavy with exhaustion. The others didn't argue. Not one. Not even the Drankari representative. What was left of them, anyway. He just nodded and muttered, "If they're still listening." They were all praying we were still listening, and I made damn sure they knew we were. I leaked a memo 3 days later. Not officially, of course, just a simple transmission, bouncing off a dozen shadowed relays, worded carefully to sound like it wasn't supposed to be heard. Earth is not interested in resuming full membership. However, Earth is willing to support independent stabilization efforts through experienced human intermediaries. A single sentence, but it changed everything. Suddenly, the requests flooded in, advisors, mediators, infrastructure analysts, energy grid specialists, not soldiers, not diplomats, operatives. Earth was now the invisible empire, our influence everywhere, our face nowhere. Back on Nexus 3, I reported to the commander in one of the Ark's black rooms. Same gray stare, same unreadable expression. He reviewed my updates without speaking. I could feel his mind parsing data faster than any Council AI ever could. After a while, he spoke. "You see what's happening?" "Yeah," I said. "They're crawling back, one by one. They think they're hiring help. What they're doing is leasing sovereignty." I smirked. "And they won't know they sold it until it's already gone." He leaned forward. "You feel it yet?" "Feel what?" He tapped his chest. "The change." I didn't answer right away, but I did feel it. At first, this mission had been about revenge, about making them pay for Titan, for the children, for the lies, for the sanctions, for the way they made humanity grovel while stealing everything we gave them. But now? Now it was something more. This wasn't just punishment. This was evolution. Earth had stopped trying to fit into the galaxy's mold. Now we were reshaping the mold to fit us. Over the next year, Earth redefined galactic order, without a single official declaration, without a single fleet movement. We controlled trade routes by maintaining them. We monitored communications by repairing old satellites. We ran security by improving defense grids. And the galaxy let us. Because fear is a powerful motivator. And hope is even more dangerous. They hoped we were merciful. Hoped we'd be different this time. Hoped that our silence meant we weren't watching them fail. But we were, every step, every word, every betrayal. We were there, and soon the phrase echoed louder. In meetings, on broadcasts, across the markets. Ask Earth. They called themselves the Haraxis Compact. A minor species, really. Back in the old Council days, they were barely a footnote. Small cluster of planets, proud culture, no real military strength. They'd contributed little, asked for less. Earth had offered them tech after the war, infrastructure repairs, system backups. They declined it all. At first, that didn't matter. Not every species welcomed our help. We weren't handing out leaflets or offering friendship. We offered stability, control. You could accept it and survive, or reject it and rot. The Haraxis, though, they did something different. They didn't rot. They thrived, without Earth. They rebuilt their damaged systems manually. They restructured their economy without tapping into the Lucari-led Earth-backed markets. They ignored the regrowth protocols, even blocked the Ark-linked data lanes. In a broken galaxy crawling back to its feet, Haraxis stood on their own, and made sure we saw it. That made them dangerous, not because they were strong, but because they were proof that it was possible to say no to Earth, and live. That kind of defiance was contagious, and we couldn't allow contagion. I was sent in undercover, not with weapons, not with soldiers, with a smile, as usual. My new identity was diplomatic this time. A trade envoy from the Reconstruction Coalition, some fake initiative backed by council remnants who didn't exist anymore. I arrived with data packs full of helpful tech, shiny logistics offers, and the kind of slow-drip blackmail Earth specialized in. They welcomed me politely, took my gifts, even offered me dinner. But they never looked me in the eyes, and they never used a single piece of our technology, not even to scan it. Their prime executive, a tall, four-armed woman named Thalix, met me in a chamber that smelled like citrus and metal. No guards, no aides, just us. She looked calm. I was not. "You've seen what the galaxy has become," I said. "Chaos, piracy, famine. Earth is offering structure, a seat at the new table." "We're building our own table," she said without blinking. "It won't last. The galaxy is too fractured. And Earth intends to keep it that way. That caught me off guard. Not because it wasn't true, but because no one had said it out loud before. She leaned forward. You didn't come to offer trade. You came to test how much we'd kneel. I stayed quiet. Then she delivered the real blow. We'd rather burn. I reported back to Nexus. They weren't surprised. They're too proud, the commander said, reading my report. Too small to threaten us, too visible to ignore. What's the move? I asked. He didn't answer right away, just turned toward the massive star map on the wall. Dots pulsed across it, Earth's influence, bleeding outward like veins. He tapped the Heraxis cluster. 4 planets, 12 moons, one singular act of defiance. Make them irrelevant. How? No violence. Not yet. Just isolation. Cut them off. Quietly, financially, digitally, politically. Every species that trades with them, flagged. Every relay they connect to, jammed. Every system they access, glitched. Turn them into ghosts. Exactly. He turned back to me. And if they still won't kneel after that? I knew what he meant, and I didn't argue. The purge began within a week. First, the Lucari blocked trade with Heraxis, not because they wanted to, but because their economic systems were now so intertwined with Earth's that they couldn't risk defiance. Then came the blackouts. Every outer Heraxis colony lost access to navigation relays. Transport ships failed mid-jump. Supply stations went dark. Their complaints reached the Coalition's new central hub, Earth's voice behind a glass curtain, and were logged, ignored, and buried. Still they held. They rerouted manually, mined their own resources, resorted to analog systems that hadn't been used in decades. And when their prime executive released a galaxy-wide message calling Earth the Shadow Empire, it went viral. People listened, not just the broken ones, not just fringe rebels and pirate colonies. Even some Coalition loyalists started asking questions. Is Earth taking over? Are we still free? Are we trading survival for slavery? It was happening. Doubt, the one thing Earth couldn't allow, so we stopped being silent. The second phase was subtle. We exposed corruption on Heraxis's moons. False, but believable. Faked videos, artificial messages from whistleblowers, edited documents showing money laundering and slave labor. We leaked it anonymously. Let the galaxy chew on it. Heraxis denied everything, called it manufactured. But no one listened anymore. Truth didn't matter. Perception did. One by one their alliances cracked. Trade collapsed. Imports slowed. Internal riots began. And Earth watched. But they didn't collapse. They didn't come begging. Instead, they turned inward, retreated from interstellar politics, went dark voluntarily, canceled all diplomatic channels. They became their own fortress. Their silence was louder than any scream. And it worked. For the first time since Earth began its silent rise, someone had resisted long enough to survive it. That wasn't a win. It was a warning. So the final order came through. Simple. Cold. One line. End it. I volunteered. I had to. I'd been there since the beginning. I saw their eyes, their pride, their hope. And I knew if we let them stand, more would follow. More would question Earth. And Earth wasn't in the business of being questioned. I arrived in the middle of a solar eclipse. Fitting, in a poetic way. A shadow overtaking the light. The Heraxis Prime Chamber was empty, abandoned hours before I landed. They knew. They were waiting. I found Prime Executive Thalix on the observation deck of their capital's tower. Same calm eyes, same voice. You're not here to negotiate? No. You're not here to kill me either? No. She turned back to the view. You're here to erase us. She wasn't afraid, not even bitter, just tired. You held longer than anyone, I said. You stood up when others begged. And it changed nothing. It changed everything. She turned back toward me. Her voice was a whisper. "They'll come for you one day." I shook my head. Number, we don't give them time to build dreams anymore. We didn't drop a bomb, didn't fire a missile. We buried them in silence. Within 48 hours, every Heraxis system was flagged as a quarantine zone. Every frequency was jammed, every jump route rerouted. Their names were wiped from trade logs, navigation charts, cultural archives. It was as if they'd never existed. Even their memory was deleted, digitally, socially, economically. And Earth moved on, like we always do. But something changed in me. I didn't report back for 2 weeks. Spent the time in silence aboard a dark ship, floating just beyond the Heraxis border. Watching. I thought I'd feel satisfaction, but all I felt was a question I couldn't answer. At what point do we become the thing we destroyed? Then a transmission came through. Unofficial. Unregistered. From a Heraxis satellite that should have been offline. It was just a voice. Thalix's voice. To whoever is listening, we are still here. We are still standing. We don't need you to remember us. We just need you to know Earth can be defied. The signal cut, but the message had already spread. It was intercepted, echoed, reposted in the darknets, pirated onto forgotten colonies, carved into spaceport walls. Not a call to arms, just a reminder. Earth wasn't a god. Earth could be resisted. And that was the beginning of our first real threat. Not from Heraxis, but from the idea they left behind. It started with a whisper. On a backwater station near the Cradle dust rings, a bartender handed a drink to a freight runner and said, "They say the Heraxis are still alive." The freight runner laughed. "They're ghosts, man. Earth wiped them." The bartender didn't argue, just slid another glass across the bar. By morning, a message had been carved into the bathroom wall. Earth can be defied. 2 days later, that same message appeared in a hidden data stream buried beneath the Coalition's secure comm network. Just 6 words, scrolling endlessly. No signature, no location, but everyone knew where it came from. Heraxis, or what was left of it. The phrase spread like radiation, appearing in trade logs, in cargo crates, in corrupted security feeds, graffiti on bulkhead doors, inscribed into ammo shipments. Not loud, not violent, just everywhere. No one said it out loud, not in public, but they all read it. They all knew. Earth had made one mistake. It silenced a people, and in doing so, made them eternal. At Nexus 3, they called it a glitch. At Nexus 5, they labeled it a psychological blip. But at Nexus 1, the Arc Core, Command didn't speak at all. They just listened. And they watched. By month 2, 6 minor colonies that had requested Earth-backed support quietly pulled their applications. No official reason, no press releases, just withdrawals. By month 3, 2 of Earth's front companies were attacked. Small-scale cyber strikes. Nothing critical, but they left messages behind. You are not invisible. This is not your galaxy. We remember. The names attached to the attacks were aliases, but the code, it was Heraxis made. Somehow, in the middle of total isolation, they'd found a way to talk to the galaxy. And worse, the galaxy was starting to talk back. I was pulled into Arc Command again. Same cold room, same lights. But the commander wasn't alone this time. There were 5 others, men and women I hadn't seen before, clean-cut, focused, the kind of people who didn't blink unless told to. "We're initiating Phase Omega," the commander said. "Containment isn't enough. Influence isn't enough." "What's the mission?" I asked. He turned the holomap toward me. Red flares blinked across it, colonies with increased Heraxis sympathies, trade routes now considered unstable, stations with increased pirate activity, political dissent, or sudden technological independence. These systems aren't rejecting us because they hate us, he said. They're rejecting us because for the first time, they think it's possible. And it is, one of the others muttered. Everyone turned toward him. He didn't flinch. We didn't kill Heraxis, he said. We buried their systems, their satellites, their cities. But we didn't erase them. They're still alive. Somewhere. Broadcasting through ghost channels, feeding information to the outer colonies. And Earth doesn't tolerate infection, I said. The commander nodded. You're going back into council space. Quiet. No credentials, no backup. Find the leak, find the voice, and silence it. I looked at the map again. So many red dots. Too many. It won't be one voice, I said quietly. It's an echo now. Then kill the echo. My infiltration began on Lunara 9, a mining colony orbiting a gas giant in the outskirts of the old Visari Empire. Heraxis sympathies were rumored, but no direct connection had been confirmed. Until I arrived. It wasn't banners or riots. That's not how rebellion works when you're living under Earth's shadow. It was eyes. The way people looked at me when I said I was from the Reconstruction Coalition. Polite? Still. But cold. Then I saw it. Scratched into the underside of a fuel pipe in the service dock. We remember Titan. That was the first time in years I felt something break inside me. The Titan massacre. 2,000 civilians, bombed by council ships under Drankari command, Earth's children, Earth's medics. They'd died silently, and Earth had waited, built, burned the galaxy down for it. But someone else, someone forgotten, had carried that name too. Titan hadn't been erased. It had been remembered, not by Earth, but by Heraxis. The rebel cell on Lunara 9 was small, careful. They didn't organize openly, didn't march or protest. They printed books, actual books, pages, ink, untraceable. One of them made its way into my hands from a cargo runner who thought I was one of them. Just a slim volume. No author. Title? When Earth blinked, I read it in one sitting. It didn't accuse Earth, didn't scream. It just asked questions. What does peace look like when it's held at gunpoint? If a species must trade its voice for survival, has it truly survived? Can you love your savior and still fear them? The final page held one sentence. Earth's silence was the loudest sound we ever heard. I stared at that line for hours. Then I burned the book. Not because I wanted to, but because I understood its power. Words were becoming weapons, and Earth was bleeding from 1,000 paper cuts. Command wanted names, locations, maps of resistance movements. They sent me deeper. Krell Station, Durath Prime, Sundive Belt. Everywhere I went, the same message echoed. We are not enemies, but we are not yours. And with every echo, Earth's grip loosened. Not all at once, not in flames, but in quiet withdrawals. In sectors that didn't respond fast enough. In council advisors who went dark. In ARC operatives who suddenly vanished. It wasn't collapse, it was erosion, and no one was stopping it. Not even me. Because something had started to change in me. I used to believe in Earth's dominance, in the logic behind our vengeance, our silence, our cold control. But now I'd seen what Earth had overlooked. The fire Earth feared was never rebellion. It was memory. We'd erased the Heraxis planets, but not the truth. Eventually I found them, or maybe they found me. It was on Vossar's grave, a rogue asteroid colony outside legal space. I followed a signal, ghost-coded, bouncing off a dozen abandoned relays. I expected a hideout. What I found was a sanctuary. No weapons, no guards, just people. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Engineers, teachers, refugees. Some ex-council, some ex-coalition. One of them was Heraxis. Old, scarred, one arm gone, face weathered. He looked at me the moment I entered and said, "You're here to kill the story." I didn't answer. He poured me a drink, sat beside me. "You were there, weren't you? At the council spire, when Earth pulled the plug?" I nodded. "And you still think this path leads to peace?" I didn't know anymore. He leaned back, closed his eyes. "Do you know what Haraxis feared the most?" "What?" "That one day we'd win." That stopped me cold. Win what? This war of silence, the control, the power, that we'd become like Earth, that we'd forget why we resisted. "And did you?" He opened his eyes. But Earth did. That night I sent a message to Nexus, just 5 words. "We may have gone too far." No reply came. None ever would. Because Earth doesn't apologize. Earth doesn't ask. Earth decides. But for the first time, Earth wasn't the only one deciding. The whispers had grown too loud. Too many people had started remembering. And once a memory awakens, you can't kill it. The message reached ARC Command at 0400 hours. Not a coded transmission. Not a tactical ping. Just a public broadcast, wide spectrum, blasted across every known system. Pirate, civilian, military. From Sol to the dark edges of the dead Council Rim. It was her voice again. Thalix, the ghost of Haraxis. "We are not soldiers. We are not rulers. We are not conquerors. We are the memory you tried to bury. And we are still here." There was no threat in the message. No demand, no rally cry, just those last 4 words. Still here. Still. Present. And for the first time since the arcs activated, Earth couldn't silence it. Because the message wasn't coming from a planet or a station. It was coming from the relay graves, the ancient pre-council communications lattice buried in abandoned systems, forgotten for centuries. They were unmonitored, untraceable. And suddenly, everyone was listening. Within 24 hours, over 80 fringe systems joined the call, some openly, some just by repeating the message. "We are still here." It echoed across trade routes, slipped into navigation software, appeared on cargo scans, haunted secure channels. And Earth? Earth hesitated. Not because we were afraid of war, but because this wasn't war. This was remembrance, and we'd built no weapon to fight that. I was ordered back to Nexus 1. Not summoned, ordered. That hadn't happened since Titan. The commander met me in the Hall of Thought, where long-term policy was drafted, where ARC architects designed the future of control. Only he wasn't alone. There were others. People I didn't recognize. Younger, colder, new blood strategists, grown in the silence, raised in the shadow of victory. They'd never lived in the age when Earth was humble, never learned the value of restraint. The commander didn't greet me, just spoke. "They've hijacked the narrative." I didn't answer. "There's sentiment now, across at least 63 colonies, people saying Earth's occupation is unnecessary, oppressive." "It is," I said. That got their attention. A few stiffened. One glared. The commander only watched me. "What do you recommend?" he asked, voice flat. "Pull back," I said. "Let the message burn itself out. Don't fuel it. Don't fight it. Time is our best weapon." A pause. Then one of the younger strategists stepped forward. "And if it doesn't die?" I looked her dead in the eye. "Then maybe it's time we ask why it's alive at all." The room fell quiet. Because I'd said what none of them wanted to face. The truth was, we hadn't created peace. We'd created obedience, and obedience has an expiration date, especially when built on silence. Earth didn't respond publicly. That wasn't our way. But quietly? We doubled down. New restrictions hit fringe systems, code-based sanctions, licensing penalties, AI recalibrations that coincidentally disrupted commerce. It wasn't overt. but it was felt. Earth was tightening the leash again, and the leash bit back. 3 days later, Veltrix Port Authority, once a loyal trade ally, declared neutrality. They severed all reconstruction contracts, kicked out Earth-appointed advisors. They didn't ask for war. They just said they wanted to breathe again. That same day, a Council-era colony, Juno's Gate, replaced their Earth-licensed AI with a Heraxis-built OpenNet. Less efficient, less stable, but free. The effect was immediate. Others followed. Whispers became statements. "We're not anti-Earth. We're just not yours. We'll take our chances with chaos over controlled peace. We've had enough of silence." It was happening. Not all at once. Not explosively, but like cracks in a glacier, and behind each crack, a flood waited. Back at Nexus, the tension grew. One strategist proposed a surgical campaign, wipe out known resistance hubs, then blame it on pirate factions. Noise, they called it. Whiteout warfare. Another suggested digital isolation. Shut down the entire relay system for a week, blame solar interference, sweep the comms clean. The commander said nothing, just stared at the data feeds, watching the defiance grow. Then, one evening, he summoned me alone. No audience, no cameras, no rank, just two men who had seen too much. He poured a drink, real whiskey, not synthetica, offered me a glass. "I saw what you saw," he said. I said nothing. "We built a new order," he went on. "And for a while it worked, but it wasn't peace, was it?" I drank. "No," I said. "It was fear." He nodded slowly. "And we told ourselves that was enough." "It never is." He exhaled hard. "I want out." That stopped me. "Your command." "Not anymore. I gave them my resignation yesterday." "They won't accept it?" I didn't ask. He finished his drink, then looked me in the eye. "I think we made a mistake." I nodded once, and for the first time since the Council fell, I saw doubt in Earth's most unshakable man. The next morning he was dead, airlock breach, logged as a systems malfunction. But we both knew better. Someone had accepted his resignation after all. That was the turning point for me. Not Thalix's broadcast, not the message, not even the whisper of rebellion. It was that silent purge, that reminder, that Earth, my Earth, was now a machine that eats its own. So I disappeared, cut my tag, fried my neural trace, burned my ship. I became what Earth feared most, a ghost with memory. They came after me, of course. Black Flag retrieval teams, whisper agents. But Earth trained me better than anyone, and now I used their own systems against them. I moved from station to station, planet to moon. Each place, I left one thing behind. A story. Not a lecture, not a rant. Just truth. About Titan. About the arcs. About the cost of silence. And about the one thing Earth never wanted spoken again. The day the Council realized Earth had been playing nice. It caught on, because stories are seeds. And I planted thousands. 1 year later, I watched from the outer rings of the Kryden swarm as the Coalition voted to dissolve Earth's central oversight. Not because they hated Earth, but because they were tired of being afraid. They weren't defiant, just done. And in that moment, Earth was finally faced with the one truth we'd ignored for 100 years. You can't rule memory. You can silence voices. You can erase names. But you can't kill the moment people start asking questions. The arcs are still out there, hundreds of them. Watching, waiting, planning. And maybe one day they'll rise again. Try to rebuild the Shadow Empire. Maybe they'll learn. Or maybe they won't. But as for me, I keep moving. Because I know Earth better than anyone. I know its pride, its power, its darkness. But I also remember the part it buried. The human part. The messy, beautiful, defiant soul of Earth that once looked up at the stars, not to conquer, but to belong. Maybe we'll find that again. Maybe not. But I'll keep telling the story. Because the day Earth stopped playing nice was the day the galaxy learned that silence is not peace, and peace, real peace, can only exist when no one is afraid to speak. When the Varn Dominion arrived in Earth's orbit, they came not as diplomats or explorers, but as conquerors. They had subjugated a dozen worlds before ours, turning their inhabitants into laborers, pets, or worse. Humanity, to them, was just another primitive species waiting to be tamed. They broadcast their demands on every channel, in every language, making it clear, surrender or be wiped from existence. Their ships, vast and ominous, hovered over every major city, their weapons charged and ready. At first, the world government scrambled to negotiate, to find a peaceful solution. But the Varn had no interest in diplomacy. When Earth hesitated, they made an example of New Delhi, reducing it to smoldering rubble with a single energy blast. Millions died in an instant. The message was clear: obey or perish. The Varn had seen resistance before. On other worlds, rebellions lasted days, perhaps weeks, before being crushed beneath their superior firepower. They assumed Earth would be no different. They were wrong. At first, humans responded with conventional warfare, jets, missiles, and coordinated strikes. But the Varn swatted them away like insects. Their shields held firm, their counterattacks devastating entire battalions. The death toll climbed with every hour. Then, something changed. The Varn noticed something strange. The humans didn't break. They didn't scatter in fear like the other species had. In fact, with every act of brutality, the humans grew more resolved, more ruthless. It wasn't just their military that fought. It was everyone. Civilians crafted makeshift weapons. Hackers infiltrated alien systems. Scientists in hidden labs worked day and night to reverse engineer stolen alien tech. Every man, woman, and child found a way to resist. The Varn saw their cities burn, but they didn't see despair. They saw rage. And then the real horror began. Captured Varn soldiers were not taken as prisoners in the traditional sense. No, the humans had something far worse in mind. They dissected them, studied them. Within days, Earth's leading biologists cracked the secret of their physiology, exploiting weaknesses even the Varn themselves weren't aware of. Reports began pouring in from occupied zones. Varn warriors, fearless in battle, started disappearing in the night. When their bodies were found, they had been butchered with terrifying precision. Some had been skinned alive. Others left hanging from ruined buildings as a warning. The Varn had underestimated humanity's ability to learn, to adapt. Worse, they had overlooked the most terrifying thing about our species. We are not bound by rules of war. On the 4th week of the invasion, the first Varn warship crashed into the Atlantic. It wasn't taken down by missiles or high-tech weaponry. It was hacked, its own systems turned against it by human ingenuity. Within days, more ships fell. The humans had cracked their codes, their networks. The Varn, for the first time in their history, felt fear. They sent reinforcements, doubling their forces, thinking sheer numbers would crush the resistance. It didn't. Instead, the humans grew bolder, more creative, more savage. They sent diplomats, hoping to negotiate a surrender on humanity's terms. But the humans didn't want peace anymore. They wanted vengeance, and they were just getting started. The Varn High Command, arrogant and overconfident, had assumed that humanity would crumble under the weight of superior firepower. They had no concept of the depths of human rage, of our ability to hold a grudge, to turn pain into purpose. By the 6th week of the invasion, the Varn were no longer the hunters. They were the hunted. Their warships, once mighty symbols of conquest, became tombs in the sky. Earth's engineers, working with salvaged alien technology, devised viruses that infected Varn systems, forcing their own ships to fire upon each other. Their weapons, once so devastating, were now unreliable, turning off at random, overheating, or worse, exploding in their own hands. But it was the ground war where the true horror unfolded. Human guerrilla fighters struck without warning. They knew their own terrain, moved like ghosts in the ruins of cities, used everything at their disposal: urban warfare, psychological tactics, biological weapons. The Varn had expected direct confrontations, traditional battles. What they got instead were ambushes, assassinations, and traps so cruel they made even their hardened warriors hesitate. Entire platoons of Varn soldiers would enter a building, only for the exits to be rigged with explosives. Others found themselves funneled into narrow corridors where waiting humans tore through them with scavenged plasma rifles. Some were lured into seemingly abandoned areas, only to be attacked by rabid dogs infected with alien diseases, courtesy of human scientists who had no ethical boundaries left to consider. Captured Varn officers were subjected to the same brutality they had inflicted on others. They were dissected, experimented on, their weaknesses broadcasted to every remaining resistance cell. Humans discovered that the Varn had an acute sensitivity to certain sound frequencies. Within days, speakers blared high-pitched sonic attacks across battlefields, forcing the aliens to collapse in agony before being executed. And the worst part? The humans enjoyed it. Varn prisoners spoke of the way their captors smiled as they worked, the way they relished every scream, every broken bone. This was no longer a fight for survival. It was a massacre in the making. The Varn, once the masters of terror, now found themselves drowning in it. Their forces were dwindling. Their reinforcements hesitated, reluctant to deploy to a planet where soldiers were vanishing without a trace. The Empire, vast as it was, had never seen such resistance, never faced an enemy so willing to drag them into the abyss. And then, on the 9th week, the unthinkable happened. The Varn retreated. Not because they had lost too many troops, though their casualties were staggering. Not because their weapons had failed them, though their technology had been turned against them. No, they retreated because they had finally understood the truth. Humanity was not fighting for survival. We were fighting for revenge. The Varn High Command made the call, abandoning Earth and ordering all remaining forces to flee. But humanity wasn't done, not by a long shot. We had captured their ships, we had cracked their codes, and we had learned one very important lesson. We weren't just defending ourselves. We were coming for them. As the last of the Varn warships broke orbit, humanity did not cheer. There were no grand celebrations, no triumphant speeches. There was only cold, silent rage, the kind that burns slow, deep, and never truly fades. The world was in ruins. Cities had been reduced to craters. Entire nations had been shattered. Millions were dead. Families erased. But humanity had endured. And now we had something we never had before. A reason to go to war beyond our own planet. Earth's brightest minds, scientists, engineers, tacticians, began working tirelessly, reverse engineering what little remained of the Varn technology. Within weeks, human scientists had developed their own versions of energy-based weaponry. Within months, they had begun outfitting their own warships. The world had changed. Governments had fallen. New alliances had risen in their place. It was no longer about countries or borders. Humanity had been forged into something new, unified by vengeance, bonded by blood. And we were no longer content to wait. The first human fleet, an armada of salvaged Varn ships and newly constructed human warcraft, launched a year after the invasion. It was not a mission of exploration. It was not a diplomatic voyage. It was an act of war. Our scouts found them first. A Varn colony world, bustling with activity. A planet that had never known war, never seen the devastation its people had unleashed upon others. The humans watched from orbit, studying the Varn civilians going about their daily lives, utterly unaware of what was coming. Some of the human commanders hesitated. These were not soldiers, not the ones who had raised our cities, but the decision had already been made long before the fleet had left Earth. The Varn had shown us no mercy. We would return the favor. The first strike was swift and merciless. Human ships descended upon the colony like avenging wraiths, bombarding their cities, cutting off their escape routes. Buildings collapsed in fire and ash. Varn civilians, unarmed and defenseless, fled in terror, just as humans once had. And then the ground troops landed. They moved through the ruins like phantoms, executing every Varn in sight. No distinction was made between soldier or civilian, young or old. Humanity had no interest in fairness. Some of the Varn begged for mercy. The humans laughed. There was no surrender. No prisoners, no diplomacy. By the time the last of the human warships left orbit, the planet was little more than scorched rock, a graveyard, a warning. And it was only the beginning. The Varn Dominion had built an empire on conquest and subjugation. They had never known fear, never understood the true cost of war. But now, for the first time in their long and arrogant history, they were afraid. And humanity was just getting started. The Varn High Command received word of the colony's destruction in stunned silence. They had underestimated humanity once before, and it had cost them dearly. But this was something else. The humans were supposed to be a broken species, licking their wounds, grateful to have survived. Instead, they had done the unthinkable. They had retaliated, and they had done it with a level of cruelty and efficiency that sent a chill through the ranks of the Varn leadership. The Varn had always been the predators, the conquerors. Every species they had ever encountered had either surrendered or been exterminated. But humanity had changed the game. They weren't fighting for survival anymore. They were hunting, and they were learning. The next human attack came swiftly. Another Varn colony, reduced to ashes. Entire cities wiped out overnight. The humans were moving fast, striking with precision, adapting to Varn defenses with terrifying speed. They didn't just kill, they studied. Each battle was a lesson, each skirmish a chance to perfect their tactics. And the worst part? The Varn couldn't stop them. Human ships were smaller but faster. Their soldiers were outnumbered, but fought with a savagery the Varn had never seen. The humans did not fight to win battles. They fought to annihilate. Soon, it was no longer just colonies falling. Varn outposts, supply lines, even military strongholds began vanishing from their star maps. Some were obliterated in orbital bombardments. Others were infiltrated and turned against their own kind. Entire battalions of Varn soldiers disappeared overnight, their bodies never found. The ones who did return came back different. They spoke of shadows moving through the ruins, unseen killers who struck without warning. They whispered of human war cries in the dark, of screams echoing through their comms before falling silent. Some raved about being watched, about the feeling of something lurking just beyond sight, waiting to strike. The Varn had thought humanity was primitive, but humans had mastered something far worse than technology. They had mastered fear. The Varn homeworld, once the heart of a mighty empire, was now a place of paranoia and dread. Every high-ranking official knew what was coming. The question wasn't if humanity would strike the core worlds. It was when. For the first time in Varn history, they considered surrender. The war had spiraled beyond their control. The humans weren't just winning. They were dismantling everything the Varn had built, piece by piece. And then the final message came. A single human transmission, broadcasted across every Varn channel. No threats, no demands, just 6 words. "We are coming. You started this." Panic erupted. The Varn government fractured. Some demanded a last stand, an all-out war against humanity. Others whispered about fleeing, about abandoning their empire and seeking refuge in the uncharted void. But deep down, they all knew the truth. There was nowhere to hide. Because humans don't just fight wars, they end them. The final days of the Varn Dominion were not marked by glorious last stands or heroic resistance. There was no honor in their defeat, only terror, only inevitability. The humans did not launch a grand offensive toward the Varn homeworld. They did not send a fleet to blockade their space. No, that would have been too predictable, too merciful. Instead, they let fear do the work for them. One by one, Varn systems went dark. Entire planets fell silent overnight, their populations wiped out without a single distress signal sent. The few survivors who managed to escape spoke of horrors beyond comprehension. They spoke of human ships appearing from nowhere, striking with brutal efficiency before vanishing again. They spoke of power grids shutting down, life support systems failing, ships self-destructing before their crews could react. The Varn, once a proud and mighty race, were being hunted like animals. And then the assassinations began. Varn leaders were not just killed. They were made into examples. The High Warlord of the Dominion was found impaled on the spires of his own palace, his body skinned, the words, "Remember New Delhi," carved into his chest. The Minister of War was discovered in his private bunker, suffocated by an unknown gas that had melted his lungs from the inside. On the walls, written in his own blood, was a simple phrase, "No surrender, no mercy." One by one, the ruling elite fell. Some tried to flee, abandoning their people, hoping to disappear into the far reaches of the galaxy. But there was no escape. Human operatives tracked them down, no matter where they ran, and made sure they suffered before the end. By the time the first human fleet arrived in orbit around the Varn homeworld, there was no need for battle. The planet had already fallen. The cities were in chaos, the streets filled with rioting and despair. Entire military divisions had deserted, knowing there was no point in fighting an enemy that had already won. The humans didn't even need to fire a shot. They simply landed, and the Varn surrendered. But humanity was not interested in surrender. There would be no peace treaties, no integration, no second chances. The Varn had shown no mercy when they came to Earth. They had slaughtered millions without hesitation, without remorse. And humanity had learned. They gathered what remained of the Varn leadership in the ruins of their great capital city. They forced them to kneel before the remnants of their once mighty empire. And then, one by one, they were executed. Not quickly, not mercifully, but slowly, deliberately. By the time the last body fell, the message was clear. Humanity had not just won. They had erased the Varn from history. The empire was gone. The species, once feared across the stars, was no more, and the galaxy would never forget the lesson they had learned. You do not provoke humanity, because if you do, we will not stop. We will not forgive. And we will never, ever forget. With the Varn Dominion shattered, its people exterminated, and its homeworld reduced to a graveyard, humanity stood at the precipice of something greater than vengeance. We had won. But now, we had a choice to make. For the first time in history, humanity was no longer bound to a single world. We had conquered the stars, not as explorers, not as diplomats, but as predators. The other alien species, once subjects of the Varn Dominion, now looked upon us with a fear they had once reserved for their former masters. Some reached out in hopes of forming alliances, offering peace and friendship. Others abandoned their colonies entirely, terrified that they would be next. And humanity? We did not respond. We had tasted war, and we were not ready to let go. The first true human empire was forged in the ruins of the Varn. It was not built on ideals of freedom or unity, but on power, strength. The simple, undeniable truth that we had become something far worse than the Varn had ever been. We did not rule with diplomacy. We ruled through fear. We did not ask for territories. We took them. We did not offer treaties. We offered ultimatums. Those who knelt were allowed to live, their civilizations spared under the condition that they swore absolute loyalty to the new order. Those who hesitated, even for a moment, were wiped out as effortlessly as the Varn had been. The galaxy trembled as the human war machine continued its relentless march. What had begun as vengeance had become something else entirely. A hunger, a purpose. The other species watched in horror as humanity reshaped the stars in its image. Former Varn slave worlds were repopulated, not by their original inhabitants, but by human colonists, eager to claim new lands, new resources. Cities were rebuilt with human architecture, factories churned out warships by the thousands, and fleets expanded, no longer just for war, but for conquest. There were no rebellions. There was no resistance. The galaxy understood now. The humans were not just another empire. They were something far worse, a species that had learned not just how to win wars, but how to ensure they never needed to fight them again. Because who would dare challenge the monsters that had destroyed the Varn? Who would stand against the species that had rewritten the rules of war, that had turned survival into a weapon? No one. And so humanity continued its march, leaving only silence in its wake. Decades passed. The Varn were a distant memory, their homeworld a silent monument to what happens when you cross humanity. Their once feared empire had become nothing more than whispers in the dark, stories told to children of other species, warnings of the monsters that lurked among the stars. But humanity did not stop. We had turned war into an art, conquest into an instinct. We had evolved past the need for mercy, past the need for hesitation. The galaxy had given us a reason to fight, and in doing so, it had forged something unstoppable. There were no challengers left. The great empires that had once thrived in the shadows of the Varn either bowed or burned. Those who surrendered were allowed to keep their names, their cultures, their illusions of independence. But they answered to Earth now. Those who resisted no longer existed. Entire species vanished, their planets wiped clean and repurposed for human expansion. Not because we hated them, not because we needed their worlds, but because we could. Because humanity had learned a simple truth. War is the only language the universe understands, and we had become its most fluent speakers. The once fractured nations of Earth had long since faded, replaced by a single unified force, the human dominion. It was not ruled by politicians or idealists, but by warriors. By those who had bled on the battlefields of Earth and beyond, who had survived the fires of the Varn War and emerged unbreakable. Peace was no longer an ideal. It was an illusion we did not entertain. The galaxy did not resist because it knew better. Every planet, every system, every empire that had once stood apart was now just another piece of humanity's domain. There were no more enemies left to fight, no more threats lurking in the void. We had won. And yet, humanity was restless. War was in our blood now, a part of us as intrinsic as breath. The absence of battle left a void, an emptiness we could not fill with politics or civilization. We had conquered the galaxy, and now we looked outward, beyond the mapped stars, beyond the known universe, because we were not done. There was still more to take, more to fight, more to break. The universe had made a mistake when it provoked humanity, and now it belonged to us.